All right, Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche is defending his work in the Justice Department as he faces tough questions in his confirmation hearing to take over that role permanently.
Yeah, senators grilled Blanche on a number of topics, including the Epstein files, crime across the U.S., and the IRS settlement with President Trump, which led to that creation of a so-called anti-weaponization fund. That fund has since been blocked by a judge. There's a lot at stake today. The Trump-appointed nominee and one-time personal attorney for President Trump cannot afford to lose a single Republican vote in order to move forward.
The committee also paid tribute to late Senator Lindsey Graham, who was a senior member of this committee, by placing white roses next to his nameplate. Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Tsirkin. Julie, going into this hearing where there were a few Republicans who were skeptical of supporting Blanche. One of those is Senator John Cornyn of Texas, citing potential conflicts of interest tied to the IRS settlement and the anti-weaponization fund. He asked Blanche about that. What happened in that exchange?
He did, and I think Senator John Cornyn remains the most unsure about whether he's going to move forward and confirm Todd Blanche to this position. Senator Tom Tillis told my colleague Frank Thorpe that he leans yes. And so sticking with Cornyn, his questioning really surrounded that anti-weaponization fund that you just mentioned, that IRS settlement. And I was struck by Blanche's answer initially because he said it's a moot point. It's not happening. It's not moving forward. Well, of course it's not happening because there was so much outrage and pushback against it, also from Republicans here on Capitol Hill. Take a listen to that exchange, and we'll talk about it more on the other side.
Did you discuss it with him?
No, I did not. He had outside counsel. I did not discuss it with his outside counsel either. Can I qualify that?
Sure.
After when we determined not to move forward, as the president has said, that's the only time that he and I had any conversations about this at all, was after, when it was dead, when we said we're not moving forward.
That brings up the key point that Republicans and Democrats, frankly, are examining on this committee, which is, does this individual have loyalty to the president, or does he have loyalty to the Department of Justice that he oversees?
And, Julie, there were a number of Epstein survivors attending today's hearing. What did Blanche say about meeting with them face-to-face and his work overseeing the release of the DOJ Epstein files?
Yeah, and I'm just lowering my voice here because Democrats on the committee are actually speaking about their experience in this room today. When it comes to the Epstein issue, a number of the survivors just walked out of that room behind me. They were face to face with Blanche, who was in charge, tip of the spear, really, of the Epstein issue as he was attorney underneath Pam Bondi. This is what he was supposed to be in charge of. He met with Ghislaine Maxwell. That was a huge issue for the survivors. But the biggest issue, perhaps, was the way in which these files were released. Redactions not complete. And Blanche turned around to the survivors because he was asked to do so, also asked to meet with them, commit to meeting with them this month by Senator Durbin, who's the top Democrat on the committee. And he did not make that commitment, but said, of course, that his team will do everything possible to make it happen.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.